In the name of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. I am told that there is a health food restaurant near Boston with a sign that says, "Eat here and live a long life." Not wanting to be outdone, the barbecue place next door put up a sign that read, "Eat here and die happy." Have you noticed that even when you eat your favorite food, you still get hungry again after a few hours? With all our ingesting and consumption, our hungers are still many, and our fulfillments are few. The fact is that we all get hungry, and food is a delight to be enjoyed. But life, as we know, is filled with greater hungers than empty stomach. If we have to count them, you'll be surprised how many legitimate hungers there are. Allow me to list a few. The hunger for truth, the hunger for love, the hunger for knowledge, the hunger to belong, the hunger for justice, the hunger of the imagination, the hunger of the mind, the hunger for significance. We could name much more. Many psychological studies have emerged in recognition of these hungers and needs. And I'm sure that some of our hungers can be satisfied because of our own pursuits. Education may bring us knowledge. Romance may bring us a sense of belonging. Accomplishments may bring us significance. But the message of Jesus is different. He affirms that no one thing will meet all hungers. It is in this context we need to understand the saying of Jesus, "I am the bread of life." Each one of the I ams, there are 7 of them by the way, represents a particular relationship of Jesus to the spiritual needs of men and women. Jesus is the light in the darkness, the gate to security. Jesus is the shepherd that guides. He is the way, the truth, and the life. In every one of these, we see that Jesus wants us to receive him, not for the gifts that he can give us, but for what he can be for us. It was right after feeding of the 5,000, Jesus made the first recorded "I am" statement. This was a point where Jesus had reached the apex of his popularity. And the crowds wanted to take him by force, if necessary, to make him their king. Because of this, Jesus crossed the lake to get away from their demands. But the next day, when they figured out where he was, the growing crowd came in boats and followed him across the lake. It was at that point Jesus told them, a record-breaking crowd, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty." John chapter 6 tells us the people grumbled, they mumbled, they argued, they whined, and ultimately they left in numbers. The text gives us some clues as to what kind of people who left. They were very materialistic. They could not stomach it when Jesus shifted from the physical to the spiritual. Usually when people catch up with Jesus, there is an ongoing discussion that goes on. It's fairly safe to assume that this begins at the lakeside and ends up in the synagogue. What are the first things they ask him? is another miraculous sign which would authenticate Jesus for them the identity as Messiah. Of course, they have just had a sign. It was simply providing food for 5,000 people for one afternoon. That was not enough. They provide proof from the Old Testament. Both of our readings, the Old Testament and the Psalm, will portray that. They wanted more. Moses had given them food for 40 years. For a lot of people, more than 5,000. That's what we want. This is exactly what we need, a sustaining continuation of bread. But Jesus immediately seizes this opportunity and starts teaching them. In fact, he preaches a 3-point sermon to them. He says, first of all, you are wrong. It was not Moses who gave them the food. It was God, my Father. The regular provision for us also comes from God the Father. There was nothing special about Moses' powers as far as that was concerned. Secondly, he gives them an idea about the true bread from heaven. Manna was a means of meeting their material needs, but there is bread available. Far more than that. Bread that is really heavenly. Jesus will go on to expand on this point later on. But he is saying that the bread in the wilderness, the manna, was really a pointer to the miraculous bread that is to come. To understand this better, I would like you to take you to another incident in Jesus' life. Jesus gives us a clue of this bread from heaven in his encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well. Remember that dialogue? He had tried to open up the understanding and the disciples' minds to what makes life and what is the substance of life. Because it was important for him to make them understand this before they are sent out to the world. But the disciples had their lunch boxes with them. Their hands were preoccupied with lunch boxes. They completely missed the whole point. In fact, he was talking to a socially ostracized woman whose life had been used and abused till she had no sense of self-worth at all. They chided him for talking to the outcast. You must be hungry, they said. It is not time to eat. You have to eat now. Then Jesus said, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. My food is to do the will of the Father. This is a remarkable pointer. If I am to be fulfilled means filled to the full. I must pursue that the will of God is greater than mine. A fulfilled life is one that has the will of God as its focus, not the appetite of the flesh. Then he gave the disciples another clue. Maintaining the metaphor of food, he pointed to a hunger that was universal, that went beyond bread and water. It was Christ himself, the bread of life and the spring of living water. The Samaritan woman understood it because she was in need. The transaction between Jesus and the Samaritan woman is fascinating. She had come with a bucket. Jesus sent her back with a spring of living water. She had come as a reject. He sent her back being accepted by God. She came wounded. He sent her back whole and complete. She came laden with pestilence. He sent her back as a source of answers. She came living a life of quiet desperation. She ran back, overflowing with hope. The irony of the whole thing is that the disciples had missed it all. They were out to lunch. Jesus found food and nourishment by doing the will of his Father. His life was mainly focused on that. Therefore, his message is this: I am that bread. The invitation for us is to receive that bread. In him is not just an offer of bread, he is the bread. That is why being a Christian is not just a way of feeding and living. Accepting this living bread leads us with a way of relating and being. The new way of living is fulfilling, and we feel at home with this bread of life. G.K. Chesterton had really captured the whole thing, how we are at home with this bread of life. Jesus is the living, broken bread that gives us life, meaning and purpose. This is what he wrote, a small poem he wrote. A child in a foul stable, where bees feed and foam. Only where he was homeless are you and I at home. And he concludes the poem like this: to the place where God was homeless, and all men are at home. In God's homelessness, we find our home. In God's living, broken bread, we find life in all its fullness. I had the privilege of being in Canterbury Cathedral in England to study a summer. I went through the library there, because I was there for about 3.5 months studying Anglican theology. I went through all the books. There were a lot of books written about the priests in that area. They had written their memoirs, and I read one of them. That was very touching for me. Let me share that with you. There was this priest, a vicar, in the suburb of London, in a kind of a village. He had a parishioner who was very sick. And he used to go and visit with this parishioner on a regular basis. One day he received information from his wife. Father, please come home. I don't think he's going to make it. So during that visit, the priest was trying to comfort him. And this man said, Father, I have no other problem but a lot of pain, but I find it extremely difficult to pray. This pain is excruciating. I am not able to pray. And this priest said, well, you have no problem talking to me. Why don't you simply imagine that Jesus is sitting on this chair and speak to him the way you speak to me? So he left after a prayer. And next day morning, his wife called and said, my husband has passed away last night. But there's something funny about him in the room. Would you please come? So the minister went, and they found this man trying to get out of the bed. He was at the edge of the bed. He was leaning, and he was touching this chair with a smile. He died touching a chair. He died shaking hands with Jesus. Today we will receive in a little while this bread of life. When you come up here, you'll be putting a hand in the hand of a man from Galilee. The Canadian songwriter Jean McClellan wrote this beautiful gospel hymn. It goes like this: put your hand in the hand of the man who's still in the water. Put your hand in the hand of a man who can't see. Take a look at yourself, and you can look at others differently by putting your hand in the hand of a man from Galilee. This living bread gives us a smile, even at the time of death. Maybe we should have a sign outside of this church. St. David's Restaurant. Today's special, living bread. Come and eat here and live long and die happy. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.